Keeping for you at 1-800-684-3110. We have a packed show today. Will Haynes will be joining me in studio in just a moment. And again, we'll be taking your phone calls. There's a lot of news. Obviously, all eyes have been on Minnesota. It feels like we can't, Minneapolis specifically in the Twin Cities seems to be, like I said, a very heavy, dark cloud that is over this part of the country. And it doesn't matter what the news cycle is. It's not even the same story, but things happen. Of course, we're talking about a tragic death yesterday. And look, let's not overshadow, we don't know all the details, and I'm not going to act like we do. But of course, now the politicization of it is coming into play. When you start falling on party lines, whether Republicans say, well, this is what happens. Democrats say, well, this is what happened. Is obviously someone was fatally shot by an ICE agent. And what does that look like, and how does that now play out on the scale? Now, the investigation is taking place right now. Kristi Noem is speaking right now, DHS secretary. We'll keep an eye on that, see if there's anything that we should break into. But look, I think we have to now look at this as something that it's a real bellwether of what's happening in America, how people respond to it. But then we also have to look at what the political implications are as well. As we saw Hakeem Jeffries say, what we're focusing on now, maybe we need to put a pause. Maybe we need to be shutting down the government once again, specifically over the fact that this happened, and now we need to get a better hold on what's happening with ICE. Again, I think there's a conversation that can be had on both sides of this, and I think there's probably some gray area, and I think there's somewhere in the middle. Simply those of us of faith have to come at it from a specific lens, a specific point of view. Loss of life is never the answer here. We can't be looking at it that way. But of course, you had then the mayor come out and make, kind of profanity-laced statements. Not that the president doesn't respond in that way as well. So I can't say that there's a one side better or one side that looks like they're more on the side of good in this kind of moment. But I do want to look at the bigger picture here, which is how then politics takes a tragedy and then twists it to reach their goals. And that goal may, in fact, hurt more Americans. Instead of bringing people together, instead of figuring out some sort of process or regulation or whatever it may be, the idea of we need to just shut down the government or we need to come up with something like this, it's where we see once again heading into a midterm what the real stakes are. And unfortunately, how Washington, D.C. doesn't often respect you, the human being, respect the American, doesn't even respect the people of Minnesota. And we know that. We have callers all the time from Minnesota. It's one of our top stations there in Minneapolis. I can see because I know how many of you call in. And I'd love to hear from you. How does it feel? We see it from the outside. We see it from the national news side. How does it feel in Minnesota? If you're watching in Minnesota or in the area, I'd love to hear from you. Even if you're not, I'd still love to hear from you at 1-800-684-3110. Because I believe it's at least our obligation to discuss these kind of things in a serious tone, but also in a rational tone. If you come at it from a place of just political division, you are not going to get anywhere in these conversations. You can't be on one side saying that you're the moral right and then not have a discussion about the gray areas that seem to come in. And we've seen different versions of these videos play out. And look, they are graphic videos. Again, someone got shot. Not only someone got shot, someone got murdered. And I don't know, but I haven't seen really a played out version where it seemed to be that should have been the case. There was certainly some issues. I'm sure they'll be investigated. And I'm not trying to be here and just talk, out of my own head here. I think a lot of us have been focused on what we can do and how things can help. But my real concern is the politicization of any kind of tragedy, and that Washington, D.C. jump on it. And you have now Democrats saying, well, now we need a government shutdown again because of it. And we know how that went last time. And I can point to, this has to do with the midterms, not point to helping you, the American people. Phone lines are open for you, 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. Will be joining me in the next segment. We're going to have a lot more to cover.
Overnight, Minneapolis on edge after an ICE agent shot and killed a woman. This morning, the investigation underway.
An ICE vehicle was stuck in the snow, and while trying to push it out, activists began harassing and blocking their path, boxing them onto the street. A woman parked her car, preventing the ICE agents from leaving, and was ordered to exit the vehicle multiple times. Officers attempted to open her door after she wouldn't comply. That's when she backed up her car and gunned it straight at an ICE agent. The agent opened fire on the driver to defend himself.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem claimed the driver had been stalking agents all day and had perpetrated an act of domestic terrorism.
It's very clear that this individual was harassing and impeding law enforcement operations. Our officer followed his training, did exactly what he's been taught to do in that situation, and took actions to defend himself.
But state officials and the mayor of Minneapolis dispute the account from the feds and say the woman posed no threat.
Having seen the video of myself, I want to tell everybody directly, that is.
And he aimed this explicit order at federal immigration agents.
Get the out of Minneapolis.
Demonstrators taking to the streets after the shooting. Some confronting ICE agents throwing snowballs.
This is a tragic situation. As you said yourself, any loss of life is something that we all mourn. When we look at where we are and how we got here, the left has to assume responsibility for creating an environment that should have never existed.
It's a very difficult situation that these ICE officers have to go into, particularly when you have a mayor like Mayor Fry and Governor Walz who are just fanning the flames with their rhetoric.
Their actual rhetoric about law enforcement officers and what they do in our community has been toxic, and it is a seed that has been sowing and growing for some time.
Phone lines are open for you. As I said, Logan Sekula, Will Haynes joining in studio right now. Of course, we want to talk about this. It's the main topic of the day. Minnesota seems to be where it doesn't matter if we decide, hey, we're going to divert off. Something happens in Minneapolis. And like I said, we're not based there. We're based in Tennessee. But somehow there's a cloud over this area of the country. And more tragedy keeps coming upon this area. It almost feels not real. A lot of people are commenting. Some people agree with me. Some people disagree with me, and that's okay. I think it's open to have this discussion. We need to at least talk it out. But to me, the topic on hand is not necessarily whether you think that the ICE officer was justified or not in when the car was being blocked, and we're going to find out all the details there. Whether you think they're justified in open firing, I think that's a bit much to be okay with. But let's say you are. That's fine. Now let's talk about the ramifications of this. Because in this moment now, you have the Democrats calling on a shutdown, and a shutdown of ICE. the shutdown of what could be more pain to the American people and using a moment to politicize and now swerve towards a midterm election. And that is always the concern, is sadly, Washington, D.C. doesn't have your back most of the time. They are looking towards when's the next vote. And well, that feels like what happens in these moments. Instead of moments of reflection, instead of moments of conversation, instead of looking towards it, it is bloviating and making it some sort of, political swerve.
That's right. So right now you're hearing from people like Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut, who's saying Democrats cannot vote for a DHS budget that doesn't restrain the growing lawlessness of this agency. Pramila Jayapal, who is the leader of the Progressive Caucus, Democrat from Washington in the House, said, we can't just keep authorizing money for these illegal killers. That's what they are, this rogue force. And as well, Representative Ramirez from Illinois said statements and letters are not enough. And the appropriations process and the CR expiring on January 31st is our opportunity. So some big names, especially with the leader of the Progressive Caucus, as well as the senator from Connecticut, Chris Murphy, bringing this forward and trying to basically say, like, hey, we've got another opportunity here. I know that, Chuck Schumer and Leader Jeffries are focused on the Affordable Care Act subsidies that we brought everyone to a fiscal cliff on and government shutdown last time, but maybe we try a different path and try a different shutdown. And that's where we're at. And it's actually really disheartening because there are so many problems in this country. And the rhetoric from the left that has been used since before the election, even now, calling ICE illegal killers, blanket statements about human beings and that work for the federal government, that ICE are illegal killers. That's taking it so broad. And I think that's what you were also cautioning people of. There's a lot of facts we know, a lot of things we've seen, a lot of things we don't know about what happened there. And so maybe everyone should take a step back. But on the right, we are seeing everyone fall in line as well. And on the left, everyone is falling along party lines, that there is nothing wrong that happened and that there is everything wrong that happened. And I think at the same time, just like I said, these are human beings that are members of ICE. There was an American citizen that was killed by federal law enforcement yesterday. And I think we need to at least look into it. Exactly. And I think it's the exact same cries that a lot of people had on January 6th a few years ago when an American citizen was killed inside the Capitol by federal law enforcement. That you can be sad that an American was killed by federal law enforcement and want to know what really happened without even breaking your party line
or killed in general.
Right.
How about no killing? I think we should be, sadly, that's just the nature of the world. And I hate that because I think that we'd be progressing a lot further if the first jump wasn't to, and look, I see a lot of comments coming in and I know that we're ruffling feathers here and I'm not trying to. What we're trying to do is to say, take a breath, think about what you're at. If you're going to post, think about what you're posting. Think about who you're going to be influencing. Think about if you know all the facts. Do you feel like you are informed enough to really form a full opinion? I know we are not. We do not know all the facts. We know that you have the DHS, I'm saying, that was in self-defense. Yeah, but where's the line of self-defense? There is that as well, which is, was this someone driving away, fleeing an accident? Was this someone blocking a road? And when does lethal force, where's the line for lethal force? And that's something we need to have that discussion. On the other hand, we have this moment in time where every single tragedy is used as a political weapon and is used to fracture us more and is used to look at it through a lens that is frankly not American, not Christian. It is to look through a lens of a political party, which is how do we progress? How do we move? Let's say if you're a Democrat and you want to go for a shutdown here, how do we get rid of ICE? Really what we're trying to do is get votes. How do we get votes so then we can keep our jobs and somehow funnel money continually? instead of actually looking at it from a humanitarian point of view. Look, similar situation with the fraud scandal, which is what's really the heart of the fraud scandal? It may be fun to be like pointing fingers at Tim Walz or pointing fingers at Minnesota, but what it really is that the American people were hurt. Tax money was being funneled to places that did not exist and being used for fraud. Tax money that could have gone to help people. Instead, it went to fraudulent organizations, potentially illegal organizations. It went to cause harm. So the serious nature of all of this, even when it can get tied up in political theater, needs to really be addressed. And as long as we have politicians, and I think we will have politicians the rest of our lives, that are really just fighting for their job and really just fighting to stay in power, and power, I would even just put employed, we will always have these moments that are politicized. And how could they not be? And I'm saying that to both sides here. You had the mayor come out immediately in Minneapolis, make that, not crazed, but a angry, profanity-laced speech. You had President Trump respond on Truth Social with also a similar, on the other side, post. And you go, okay, so can we just take a moment, grieve with this family, address the situation that's happening? Because I don't care if you agreed with that person or not. They still probably have, I don't know if they deserve to die. I think that's a gross overstatement, at least based on what we've seen. We have to take a real hard look at all of this. And to say that it is clearly a Republican or Democrat thing, it is not. But with that, we have so many calls that are coming in as well right now. And I want you to call in, and I will take your calls because I know a lot of you disagree with me, and that's fine. 1-800-684-3110. We fight for everybody's here and everyone's free speech here at the ACLJ. It's always been important to us. And we are going to talk about other things. I don't want you to think we're just going to be doom and gloom, talking sad. We also have some fun content to get to you a little bit later in the show. But of course, this is where everyone's mind's at. And look, if a vehicle is being used as a weapon, it's all a bit gray. And what I don't love right now in society is that we jump to being the expert immediately, whether it is Venezuela, whether it is Minnesota. That somehow we all are supposed to be, or Ukraine or Gaza, whatever it may be, or Russia and Israel, or we have to know everything immediately. We have to pick our side, and we have to be, we have to make our statement immediately. This is how we feel. When sometimes you do need to take a
we got to do that again. Good evening.
Department of Justice has issued indictments mostly
Good afternoon, everybody. Let me be clear. President Trump and his entire administration stand fully behind the heroic men and women of ICE and will always uphold law and order in the United States of America. The deadly incident that took place in Minnesota yesterday occurred as a result of a larger, sinister, left-wing movement that has spread across our country, where our brave men and women of federal law enforcement are under organized attack. Right now, immigration and customs enforcement officers are facing a 1,200% increase in assaults, a 3,200% increase in vehicle rammings, and an 8,000% increase in death threats. ICE agents are faithfully enforcing federal law to protect the safety of the American people by removing criminal illegal aliens from our country, which is exactly what nearly 80 million Americans elected President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance to do. Radicals in the Democrat Party are furious over this. They don't want our border secured or criminal illegal aliens being removed. As a result, Democrats are impeding immigration enforcement operations daily, creating extremely heightened and dangerous circumstances that make it nearly impossible for the men and women of law enforcement to simply do their jobs. Democrats are calling to defund federal law enforcement agencies who are protecting public safety. And Democrats are calling to abolish ICE and defund the police. That will never be allowed to happen under this president and vice president. The Trump administration will redouble our efforts to get the worst of the worst, criminal illegal alien killers, rapists, and pedophiles off of American streets. The Department of Homeland Security will continue to operate on the ground in Minnesota, not only to remove criminal illegal aliens, but also to continue conducting door-to-door investigations of the rampant fraud that has taken place in the state under the failed and corrupt leadership of Democrat Governor Tim Walz. Taxpayers have been ripped off to the tune of billions of dollars in this one state alone, and that is going to end, and people are going to be held accountable. The Trump administration has activated thousands of federal agents, doubled the number of U.S. attorneys in the DOJ office in Minneapolis, and surged resources to hold fraudsters accountable and demand justice for law-abiding American taxpayers and citizens across our country. And that's what brings the vice president out here with me today to discuss all the Trump administration is doing and to make an additional important announcement on this front. So please, Mr. Vice President, will be joining us now.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And I want to echo some of what Carolyn said about what we're doing to combat the rampant fraud that exists in our immigration system, thanks to failed politicians and thanks to people who allowed the American taxpayer to be taken advantage of for far too long. I think it's important to understand why this matters to the American people. I am a father of 3 young kids, a lot of people in my generation. What is that going on there? Is that normal? Okay. CNN installed this broken camera just to throw me off my game, but it's not going to work. So here's the simple fact here. If you're a young parent struggling to afford childcare in the United States of America, there are programs that we have to make it easier for your kids to get in daycare, for your kids to get in preschool. Those programs should go to American citizens, not be defrauded by Somali immigrants and others. Make it hard for you to get the access to the resources you need. But number 2, making it easier for people who shouldn't even be in this country to fleece the United States and our taxpayers to begin with. We have actually activated a major interagency task force to make it possible to get to the heart of this fraud. We have Department of Agriculture resources that are focused on SNAP fraud so that people who need food benefits can get them, but illegal aliens and other fraudsters don't. We have over 1,500 subpoenas that the Department of Justice has issued to get to the heart of the fraud ring. We've done almost 100 indictments, mostly Somali immigrants, but also a few others. And of course, we're looking in with broad investigatory authority to a number of the instances of wrongdoing that we've seen in Minneapolis. But we also want to expand this. We know that the fraud isn't just happening in Minneapolis. It's also happening in states like Ohio. It's happening in states like California. And so what we're doing in order to help coordinate this remarkable interagency effort from the Trump administration, but also to make sure that we prosecute the bad guys and do it as swiftly and efficiently as possible, is we are creating a new Assistant Attorney General position who will have nationwide jurisdiction over the issue of fraud. Now, of course, that person's efforts will start and focus primarily in Minnesota, but it is going to be a nationwide effort because, unfortunately, the American people have been defrauded in a very nationwide way. I want to thank a couple of people for their cooperation, in particular Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, first of all, for getting a lot of resources to Minneapolis to start to investigate and prosecute this fraud, really at an industrial scale. We've never seen fraud like this in the history of our country. Pam has been doing a great job to get the resources there to uncover it. But importantly, creating a job like this often takes months, sometimes even longer. When we realized that we needed this Associate Attorney General position, Pam got this person up and running in about a week. We're going to make the nomination hopefully in the next few days. We'll obviously let you guys know who that is when we do it. I've talked to Senate Majority Leader John Thune, who has promised me swift confirmation for this official. But this is the person who is going to make sure that we stop defrauding the American people. And here's one final thing I'll say about this. I've heard a lot of people say that we need a special counsel to investigate fraud in the United States of America. I actually agree, and that's what this position does. It has all the benefits, all the resources, all the authority of a special counsel, but with two crucial differences. Number one, it will be run out of the White House under the supervision of me and the President of the United States. And number two, it's actually constitutionally legitimate. As you guys may know, the special counsel statute has some major constitutional questions. When we get the bad guys, we want to make sure we get them permanently and they don't have some legal technicality they can get out of, which is why we set it up as an associate attorney general. I'll take some questions, but I want to make just one final observation here. When I was actually walking out here, somebody sent me a photo of a CNN headline about what happened in Minneapolis. And this is the headline. I'm just going to read it. Outrage after ICE officer kills U.S. citizen in Minneapolis. Well, that's one way to put it, and that is the way that many people in the corporate media have put this attack over the last 24 hours. And I say attack very, very intentionally because this was an attack on federal law enforcement. This was an attack on law and order. This was an attack on the American people. The way that the media, by and large, has reported this story has been an absolute disgrace, and it puts our law enforcement officers at risk every single day. What that headline leaves out is the fact that that very ICE officer nearly had his life ended, dragged by a car 6 months ago, 33 stitches in his leg. So you think maybe he's a little bit sensitive about somebody ramming him with an automobile? What that headline leaves out is that that woman was there to interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation in the United States of America. What that headline leaves out is that that woman is part of a broader left-wing network to attack, to dox, to assault, and to make it impossible for our ICE officers to do their job. If the media wants to tell the truth, they ought to tell the truth that a group of left-wing radicals have been working tirelessly, sometimes using domestic terror techniques to try to make it impossible for the President of the United States to do what the American people elected him to do, which is enforce our immigration laws. The President stands with ICE. I stand with ICE. We stand with all of our law enforcement officers. And part of that is recognizing that you people in the media, not everybody in this room, but many people in this room have been lying about this attack. She was trying to ram this guy with her car. He shot back. He defended himself. He's already been seriously wounded in law enforcement operations before. And everybody who's been repeating the lie that this is some innocent woman who was out for a drive in Minneapolis when a law enforcement officer shot at her, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Every single one of you. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I wanted to read a quote from Tim Walz earlier today. He said, when things looked bleak, it was Minnesota's first that held the line for the nation on July 3rd, 1863. And I think we may be in that moment now. Can you comment on his rhetoric and Mayor Jacob Frey and whether they want to see unrest in Minneapolis?
Well, that's very tough rhetoric from a guy who just quit because his fraudulent activities have been uncovered. Look, Tim Walz is a joke. His entire administration has been a joke. The idea that he's some sort of freedom fighter, he's not. He's a guy who has enabled fraud and maybe, in fact, has participated in fraud. That's what this new Assistant Attorney General position is going to find out. I don't care what Tim Walz says. I care about getting to the bottom of this fraud for the American people, and I care about enforcing the nation's immigration laws. That's what we're going to stay focused on.
Unrelated question here. I mean, Democrats have accused ICE of murder. They've said they're targeting Americans. They've told ICE to get the F out of Minnesota. This is going to stoke the fire against ICE agents. And you're talking about ICE agents right now and being concerned about them. What, if anything, is the administration going to do to make sure these folks are protected during these protests? But also, should DHS sort of revisit their procedures here? I mean, nobody wants to see an American killed. Are there changes that need to be made to make sure something like this doesn't happen again?
Look, first of all, of course, nobody wants an American citizen to be killed. This is absolutely a tragedy. But it's a tragedy of the making of the far left. They have radicalized a very small segment of the population, taught them that ICE agents are engaging in wide-scale violation of people's rights. What our ICE officers are doing is deporting the millions of criminal aliens that were let in during the Biden administration. So number one, we have to say, as a matter of leadership, and I would appreciate if the Democrats would join me on this, let's be honest about the fact that we have way too many illegal aliens in this country. Our ICE officers should be supported in doing their job. You're trying to actually marshal the far left lunatic fringe to engage in doxing, to try to make it impossible for them to enforce the law, and in some cases, actually to engage in acts of domestic terrorism against our law enforcement officers. When you talk about different plans, different protocols, different policies, I forget exactly how you asked the question. Here's the simple fact. What we're going to do is make it easier for the American People's Administration to enforce the American People's law. And that means that Democrats have to stop rallying the mob against legitimate law enforcement operations. And that means that we are going to get tougher. And that's what this AAG position is about. We're going to get tougher at the people who are defrauding the United States by inciting violence against our law enforcement officers. That's one of the things that we're going to do. We've already started that work at the Department of Justice. We're going to keep on doing it, and this new AAG position is going to kick that into high gear.
Vice President Vance, you just suggested that this woman who was killed, Renee Good, is part of a broader left-wing network. Who do you think is behind this broader left-wing network?
Well, it's one of the things we're going to have to figure out. But here's the way that I put it. When somebody throws a brick at an ICE agent or somebody tries to run over an ICE agent, who paid for the brick? And who told protesters to show up and engage in violent activity against our law enforcement officers? You see, just with this most recent terrible incident in Minneapolis, you see friends of this woman's or other people who are eyewitnesses saying basically that she was there to engage in obstruction of a legitimate law enforcement operation. How did she get there? How did she learn about this? There's an entire network, and frankly, some of the media are participating in it, that is trying to incite violence against our law enforcement officers. It's ridiculous, it's preposterous, and part of our investigatory work is getting to the bottom of it. Who's funding it? Who's supporting it? Who's cheerleading it? And of course, if there's illegal activity related to that, we're going to get to the bottom of that and prosecute it where we can.
Vice President, thank you for taking questions today. Is there a risk with you describing her as a deranged leftist, talking about very specific facts of these events, when an investigation is just beginning? Are you preempting a thorough investigation by drawing such conclusions? And have you received any information beyond the videos we've seen publicly about this individual, her specific acts, that has informed your point of view?
Well, first of all, the Department of Justice is going to investigate this. The Department of Homeland Security is already investigating this. But the simple fact is, what you see is what you get in this case. You have a woman who is trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. Nobody debates that. You have a woman who aimed her car at a law enforcement officer and pressed on the accelerator. Nobody debates that. I can believe that her death is a tragedy, while also recognizing that it's a tragedy of her own making and a tragedy of the far left who has marshaled an entire movement, a lunatic fringe against our law enforcement officers. I think what is clearly happening here, and it's going to keep on happening unless the Democrats wake up and say, you know what, you don't have to agree with our immigration policies. You don't have to agree with what the president or the vice president believe about immigration enforcement. But why don't you take this to the ballot box? Why don't you vote? Why don't you organize? Instead, what some of them are doing is encouraging people to get violent with our law enforcement officials. It's disgraceful, and it's got to stop.
Mr. President, just to follow up on that question, and again, thank you for taking questions, Mr. Vice President. There's clearly a lot of emotion in Minnesota, across the country, over this incident. You're calling Renee Good a deranged leftist. There's been heated rhetoric that we've also heard from officials. What responsibility do you and the president have to diffuse some of the tension that we are seeing play out in Minnesota, bring down the temperature as this investigation is unfolding?
What we have a responsibility to do is to protect the people who are enforcing the law and protect the country writ large. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, you deserve to have the people's laws enforced in the United States of America. Now, again, I'm not happy that this woman lost her life. I'm not happy that this woman was there at a protest violating the law by interfering with a law enforcement action. I think that we can all recognize that the best way to turn down the temperature is to tell people to take their concerns about immigration policy to the ballot box. Stop assaulting and stop inciting violence against our law enforcement officers. That's the best way to take down the temperature. And we're not going to give in to terrorism on this. And that's exactly what's happening. People trying to antagonize, to commit acts of violence. They throw bricks at them. Sometimes they shoot at them. Sometimes they dox them. Sometimes they go to their place of residence and harass their families. This is classic terrorism. And we cannot say that when a far left fringe is inciting violence against our brave law enforcement officials that we're no longer going to enforce the law. That's rewarding the very people who are engaged in this garbage. The actual reward that they just got is a new assistant attorney general who is going to prosecute and investigate this stuff even more aggressively than before. Yeah.
Thanks for taking my question. So the head of Minnesota's investigations agency says that the U.S. Attorney's Office has essentially cut off the state investigations agency's access to the investigation. What is the precedent for that, and why shouldn't the Minnesota officials on the ground have access and evidence to work on this investigation?
First of all, I wish the state officials in Minnesota would investigate why you have so many people who are using their vehicles and other means to actually interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation. The precedent here is very simple. You have a federal law enforcement official engaging in federal law enforcement action. That's a federal issue. That guy is protected by absolute immunity. He was doing his job. The idea that Tim Walz and a bunch of radicals in Minneapolis are going to go after and make this guy's life miserable because he was doing the job that he was asked to do is preposterous. The unprecedented thing is the idea that a local official can actually prosecute a federal official with absolute immunity. I've never seen anything like that. It would get tossed out by a judge. So what I'd like Minnesota to focus on is the real issue that they're encouraging people. Minneapolis officials are encouraging people to commit violence against ICE officials. It's ridiculous. It's got to stop. Go ahead.
Mr. President, thank you. You said earlier that there's a left-wing network to attack, to dox, to assault, and make it impossible for ICE officers to do their job. You told my colleague just now that there's an investigation going on into that network.
Yep.
So if everything that you say is true, how does being part of that network justify being shot?
Well, being part of the network doesn't justify being shot, but ramming an ICE officer with your car, that's what justifies being shot. It's not a good thing, by the way, but when you force somebody to engage in self-defense, it's almost a preposterous question. I'm not saying that funding some of this stuff justifies capital punishment. Nobody would suggest that. The reason this woman is dead is because she tried to ram somebody with her car and that guy acted in self-defense. That is why she lost her life. And that is the tragedy. Now, there may be other violations of the law and other penalties that are associated with those violations of the law. For example, if you are funding violence against our law enforcement officers, I'm not a prosecutor. My guess is that's not the sort of thing that earns capital punishment, but it should sure as hell earn you a few years in prison if you're funding the effort to try to assault our law enforcement officers. What is, I'm sorry, guys, what's going on here? You guys are meant to report the truth. How have you let yourself become agents of propaganda of a radical fringe that's making it harder for us to enforce our laws? You just asked me a question that presumed that the reason why this woman died is because she was engaged in legitimate protest. She tried to run somebody over with her car, and the guy defended himself when that happened. Next question.
The investigation is still ongoing.
I said next question.
Mr. Vice President, I mean, you presumably watched the video yourself. There's not the slightest doubt in your mind, having viewed it, that the victim, you still believe that she deliberately tried to ram him despite seeing this video.
Look, I don't know what is in a person's heart or in a person's head, and obviously we're not going to get the chance to ask this woman what was going on. What I am certain of is that she violated the law. What I'm certain of is that officer had every reason to think that he was under very serious threat for injury or in fact, his life. What I'm certain of is that she accelerated in a way where she ran into the guy. I don't know what was in her heart and what was in her head, but I know that she violated the law, and I know that officer was acting in self-defense. It raises an interesting point, though. Look, if people want to say that we should have a legitimate debate about, what was she really doing, right? Was she panicking when she drove into this officer, or was she actually trying to ram him? That's a reasonable conversation. What's not reasonable is for so many of you to plaster all over the media that this was an innocent woman and that the ICE agent committed murder, which is what many of you have said explicitly and some of you have said implicitly. That's what I have an objection to. The idea that this was not justified is absurd, and I think everybody knows it in their heart. Yeah. In the green jacket.
Taking down the temperature, it seems like political violence is ratcheting up and riots could be around the corner. What steps does the administration have planned to try to unite America? Average people on both political sides are so tired of fighting with each other, and I think all the journalists in this room could agree with me that we don't want to be part of the problem. Do you have any words to unite America?
You know, I know you don't want to be a part of the problem, and I think that's true of a lot of you. I'm not sure it's true for everybody, because the reporting over this has been one of the biggest scandals I've ever seen in media. I've never seen a case so misrepresented and misreported when you have a guy who was defending himself and is now being treated as some sort of federal assassin by so many of the people in this room. First of all, let me say about crime. You mentioned violence. One of the things we're proudest about is that you saw violent crime over the last year drop by 20%. Why is that drop by 20%? Is it because we're attacking our law enforcement officers, or is it because we in the administration are empowering our law enforcement officers to enforce the law? I think that's one of the ways you take down the temperature, is you make people feel more secure and safe in their person and property. That's why we care so much about protecting our law enforcement, because it accrues to the benefit of the entire national community. I think that we can absolutely talk about the ways in which, you know, we can lower the temperature by discussing differences in a reasonable and rational way. Again, I'm happy to talk with any congressional Democrat or any of you about our immigration policy, about why I think it's necessary, about why I think it's in the best interest of the country, about why the President of the United States was elected to actually enforce the border for the first time in at least 4 years. So here's the problem. That's not the debate so many people are having. They are actively covering for people who are committing acts of violence against federal law enforcement. It is preposterous. The way to take down the temperature is to stop it. Have your debates about policy. Attack me. Attack the President of the United States. Don't attack our law enforcement officers. They are trying to do the job the American people demanded that they do. They are not policy actors. They are enforcing the law. They should be treated with a modicum of dignity and respect. And the fact that they're not is why incidents like yesterday happened. The one final point I'll make about this is, look, there's a part of me that feels very, very sad for this woman, not just because she lost her life, but because I think she is a victim of left-wing ideology. What young mother shows up and decides they're going to throw their car in front of ICE officers who are enforcing legitimate law? You've got to be a little brainwashed to get to that point to where you're willing, not just to protest, that's fine, not peacefully protest, but throw your vehicle in front of legitimate law enforcement officers and drive your car into them. To get to that point, you have to be, I think, radicalized in a very, very sad way. I certainly wish that she hadn't got there. I know there's an ICE officer right now who very much wishes he was not put in the position where he had to fire a gun to defend his own life. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. What's your message, following up on that, what's your message to the leaders in Minnesota, the governor of Minnesota, the mayor of Minneapolis, to calm down the situation on the ground, on the streets? What's your message also to those protesters who saw that video in a completely different way than you saw that video?
Well, first of all, I think if you watch every angle of that video, there is one angle where if you squint, you can maybe tell yourself that it's not clear what happened. But when you look at all angles of that video, it is very clear that her vehicle went right for the guy. She actually collided with him. And then that's, of course, when he fired his shots. That's obvious, okay? So what I'd say to the protesters is, by all means, protest peacefully, but make this about ideas. Make this about disagreement with our policy. Don't use your protest as a justification or an encouragement for people to go and incite violence and participate in violence against our law enforcement officials. To the people on the ground in Minneapolis, meaning the local officials in Minneapolis from Tim Walz on down, I'd say, look, why can't you just disagree with a given piece of immigration policy without turning law enforcement into the enemy? And think about, for example, a criminal law, where a police officer goes and arrests somebody because they violated a criminal law. If you're mad about that, go and protest the politician who passed that law. Don't attack the police officer who's just doing their job. We had a wide open border under Joe Biden. I happen to think it's a good thing the President of the United States has closed it down. If you think that's a bad idea, criticize this administration for a policy decision. Don't attack our people for enforcing the law, because I guarantee you go to ICE, there are black people and white people. There are Democrats and Republicans. They are patriotic Americans who are trying to enforce the law. Attack me, layoff of our ICE agents. Yeah, in the blue, all the way, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice President. You've called on Tim Walz to resign. Can you lay out the case as to why he should step down?
Well, look, I think Tim Walz should resign because it's very clear either that he knew about the fraud in Minneapolis, he knew about the welfare fraud, or at the very least, he looked the other way. I mean, this is not like Lex Luthor, right? This is not movie villain fraud. This is the lowest IQ possible fraud. This is, we're going to take the absence of kids and set up a daycare center where there are no children, and we're going to call our early childhood education center the Quality Learning Center. By the way, if you can't spell learning, maybe you shouldn't be in early childhood education. But people got rich off of this. We know that there were schools who either had no enrollment or at least they overstated their enrollment. Tim Walz, either it was unbelievable incompetence or he was in on the fraud. That's one of the things we're going to get to the bottom of. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Can you explain the difference between this Associate Attorney General and a special counsel? And do you envision this being a permanent position or having more of a limited scope?
Well, it's going to be permanent until we get to the bottom of what's going on. So I think it's going to last for at least the remainder of the administration. What's different about it from a special counsel is if you remember the Jack Smith case where the special counsel was found unconstitutional, one of the big issues there is that that person was not an appointed person, completely aside from all the other issues that the person was a lunatic and that the case had no merit. There was a fundamental constitutional issue, which is that he had not been appointed by the president and he had not been confirmed by the United States Senate. An assistant attorney general, what that's going to allow us to do is appoint this person, have them confirmed by the Senate. That's one difference. The more substantive difference is that this person is going to be part of a very broad interagency White House that's being led from the President of the United States on down. And that's going to give them the resources, the access to material and information to make this person more effective. I think a lot of people have asked, how are you really going to get to the heart of the fraud? We've been asking ourselves that question for the past couple of months, and we think this is the critical piece at the Department of Justice to really ramp this fraud investigation into high gear. In the red tie, yeah.
Vice President Vance, I wanted to ask, what's your message to far leftist agitators who feel emboldened to obstruct ICE activity in Minnesota and around the country?
Well, I think they shouldn't feel emboldened because now they have an assistant attorney general who is going to prosecute and investigate their fraud and their violence more aggressively than it has ever been investigated in the United States of America. We are doing so much to try to find the financing networks and the domestic terrorism networks that legitimate this violence, that fund this violence, and that, of course, engage in the violence. These people should not feel emboldened because they have, for the first time, maybe in American history, an administration that is not going to tolerate political violence of any kind from anywhere. Yeah.
We are clear today that the entire weight of the federal government is behind these ICE agents and this ICE agent in particular. There is still a federal investigation happening on the ground. Does that mean that they are not looking into this ICE agent at all? They are just focused on the woman who was in the car? What is the investigation if the federal government has already determined that its weight is behind this ICE investigation?
So what do you mean? When you say investigation, do you mean investigation of the shooting yesterday or of the fraud that's happening in Minneapolis?
Yesterday.
Okay, look, DHS, as I understand it, has an investigation already ongoing. I know that other organs of our government are looking at this. So yes, there's certainly an investigation that's happening right now. But as part of the broader fraud investigation, a lot of what we're doing with the Department of Justice has already started. We've got over 1,500 subpoenas. We've got people this morning, actually, we're going door to door to actually knock on some of these fraudulent care centers, these fraudulent social services organizations to get to the bottom of what's going on there. So the investigation in some ways has already been ramping up into the anti-fraud element for at least a few weeks. What we're trying to do is supercharge it and make sure there's a designated person within the Department of Justice who completely controls that particular focus.
Yeah. Just to follow up on that, Mr. Vice President, on the agent, is he still on duty or has he been placed on leave, on administrative leave? And what really was the target of the operation on Wednesday? ICE operation on Wednesday?
Well, first of all, it was a legitimate law enforcement operation. We were going door to door to try to find criminal illegal aliens and deport them from the United States of America, because if you come to our country illegally in violation of our immigration laws, then we have the mandate, and in fact, we have the legal duty to enforce those immigration laws. Whether he's been placed on administrative leave, I don't know the answer to that question. I'd refer it to the Department of Homeland Security, and they can follow up. I will say, look, I would appreciate everybody saying a prayer for that agent. Look, in the past 6 months, he has been hit twice by a motor vehicle. One time, the first time, it led to over 30 stitches and very serious injuries to his legs. This is a guy who's actually done a very, very important job for the United States of America. He's been assaulted, he's been attacked, he's been injured because of it. He deserves a debt of gratitude. And I think the media prejudging and talking about this guy as if he's a murderer is one of the most disgraceful things I've ever seen from the American media. Yeah.
Vice President, what is your specific role in the future of Venezuela? And I'm wondering, could you confirm reports that the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was kept out of the planning for the operations because of her past concerns about military involvement in Venezuela?
So I've heard a couple of things. One, that I was kept out of the planning for the Venezuela operation. That's false. And another, that Tulsi was kept out of the planning for Venezuela operations. That's completely false. Look, we're all part of the same team. And one of the things that is really amazing about that operation is that we kept it very tight to the senior cabinet level officials and related officials in our government. And we kept this operation secret for a very long time. I'm very proud of that. I think it suggests that the team works very well together. Well, looking ahead, what is my role? Look, my role is going to be whatever the president asks me to do. Well, every other day, I'm chairing the meeting that we do on this among White House principals to talk about next steps to try to ensure that Venezuela is stable. And as the president has directed us to do, to ensure that the new Venezuelan government actually listens to the United States and does what the United States needs it to do under our country's best interest. So I'm going to be as involved as the president wants me to be. So far, that's been very involved, and I'll keep on doing that so long as the president asks me to do it. In the purple.
Yes. Even
Mr.
beyond the war powers
Sorry,
resolution.
we'll go purple, and then we'll go pink or whatever that is in front.
Royal purple. And then beige. All right.
Okay.
Are there any indications, you talked about the network, are there any indications that the lady who was shot, I know there are different reports from there. Her wife said they were new to the area. Are there any indications she may have been a paid agitator, and maybe that there are others that were brought to the area, considering everything that's going on in Minneapolis?
I wouldn't say that she was paid. I don't have the evidence to say that one way or the other. What I do know is that she was violating the law. And if you just look at the eyewitness accounts, they were saying she was there to prevent the enforcement of the law. She was trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. That much is obviously clear. The rest of it, of course, is part of the reason why we investigate this stuff. Yeah.
Mr. Vice President, even beyond the war powers resolution today, Congress has bucked President Trump on issues like tariffs. Are you concerned that President Trump is losing his grip on Republicans in the Congress, and what are you going to do about it?
No, I'm not concerned at all. First of all, we talked to some of the senators who were going to vote the wrong way, in my view, on this resolution today. Much of their argument was based more on a legal technicality than any disagreement in policy. If you look at the people who actually voted, every single one of them have supported the administration's plan. Second of all, as the president, I believe himself, has already said, every president, Democrat or Republican, believes the War Powers Act is fundamentally a fake and unconstitutional law. It's not going to change anything about how we conduct foreign policy over the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months, and that'll continue to be how we approach things. Go ahead.
President. So we are seeing, regarding Iran, we are seeing the protests in Iran these days. The cities are begging for help from the U.S. and Israel, naming streets in the city after President Trump. It seems there is an opportunity here that may not come again. Will the United States stand by the citizens of Iran? And if Israel decides to strike again the nuclear sites in Iran, is the U.S. expected to take part?
Well, look, we certainly stand by anybody who's engaged in peaceful protests, anybody who's trying to exert their rights for free association and to have their voices heard. Obviously, the Iranian regime has a lot of problems. And as the President of the United States has said, the smartest thing for them to have done, it was true 2 months ago, it's true today, is for them to actually have a real negotiation with the United States about what we need to see when it comes to their nuclear program. I'll let the president speak to what we're going to do in the future, but we certainly stand with anybody across the world, including the Iranian people who are advocating for their rights. I'll take just a couple more questions. Yeah,
thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Concerning Venezuela, how would you assure the Caribbean region that they will remain a zone of peace? Because some member states in the region are concerned.
Well, look, the president had a very productive phone call with the president of Colombia yesterday, and we continue to talk at all levels of government with a number of our friends in the Caribbean region. I actually think this is really good for peace in the Caribbean, because when you take away a major source of illegal cartel revenue, which is the cocaine trade, the fentanyl trade, other sources of illicit revenue, you actually remove the power of one of the main destabilizing forces in Latin America and in the Caribbean. I really do think, look, we say it all the time, this is the president of peace. One of the ways that you establish peace in your own hemisphere is to make it clear that the United States is going to be respected, that the United States is willing to take power away from criminal cartel organizations and give it to legitimate governments. That's how we see the future of the Western Hemisphere, and we think it's going to be much more peaceful than it was certainly under Joe Biden. I'll take one more question. Go ahead.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. On Greenland, do you have a message for European leaders? Many in Europe reject the idea that the island could be for sale.
Well, first of all, Secretary Rubio, I believe, is meeting with the leaders of Denmark and Greenland next week. I want to say it is, but maybe it's the week after that. We'll continue to deliver some of these messages in private, some of them in public. But I guess my advice to European leaders and anybody else would be to take the president of the United States seriously. What has he said about Greenland? Set to the side the crazy overreactions that I've seen from the press and from certain people in Europe. What has the president said? Number one, Greenland is really important, not just to America's missile defense, but to the world's missile defense. Number two, we know that there are hostile adversaries that have shown a lot of interest in that particular territory, that particular slice of the world. So what we're asking our European friends to do is to take the security of that landmass more seriously, because if they're not, the United States is going to have to do something about it. What that is, I'll leave that to the president as we continue to engage in diplomacy with our European friends and everybody on this particular topic. And again, thank you all for listening. Thanks for taking questions. And I just ask you, look, this is politics, and often Republicans and get in arguments with the press about things. I understand that. I think it's really irresponsible for you guys to go out there and imply or tell the American people that a guy who defended himself from being rammed by an automobile is guilty of murder. Be a little bit more careful. We're going to talk about toning down the temperature, which I know the president wants to do, and I certainly want to do. One of the ways we tone down the temperature is to have a media that tells the truth. I encourage you all to do that. God bless you. Happy New Year, guys.
Look a little, you need to go to that 10,000 foot view. We do have no lines open for you right now. That's how passionate a lot of you have happened. 1-800-684-3110. We only got a minute and a half in this segment, so I'm not going to take your calls in this segment, but I will take them in the next one. And look, it's sometimes tough to come on here and do these shows because on the same hand, Minneapolis, as we said, is at sort of the crux of two different controversies right now. The other one, of course, is the fraud scandal. The ACLJ is involved in that, by the way. We're not taking that lightly. As like I said, as silly as you can make it and go, Tim Walz, funny, call him a name. We're taking aerial action here at the ACLJ. We're going to expose what was going on because billions of dollars of American taxpayer dollars are being wasted. So yesterday we filed I think 5 Freedom of Information requests. And we're going to get some answers. The ACLJ team doesn't only do that. We also have a petition where you can get behind that as well. So there are times where it's clear. And I encourage you, go spend some time at aclj.org. aclj.org. Sign the petition. Get involved. See all the content that we produce here. We have an incredible team. An incredible team that does incredible work. And it only happens because people like you sign, support, get involved, donate. It's fantastic. Phone lines are jammed. We got no lines open right now, but we'll see how many we can get to coming up in the next segment. That's at 684-3110. We'll also, you'll be able to hear specifically from some of those Democrat leaders. We'll play some of that coming up, some sound bites, some video bites. So stay tuned. Again, go to aclj.org. We'll be back with your calls and comments in just a moment, but stay engaged and involved on all our social media platforms as well. And if you're on YouTube and you haven't yet, hit subscribe. We'll be right back. I've been doing this for years, and the school district said, no, you cannot do that. You cannot pray within public. And we went, we got to win. But of course, it doesn't end here. You'd think this would be an easy spot to go, you know what? If you're this school that really hates prayer so much, you can take the L and understand the court ruled against you. We won here at the ACLJ. So congratulations to everyone who fought for that and everyone who was on the team and all of you who supported the work. That's great. But you'd hope that would be the end. But no, they decided let's maybe waste some more resources. Let's push forward because we really, really don't want prayer in this school. We really, really don't want our teachers to be praying in public.
This past year in 2025, she gets a notice from the principal that she cannot pray, that teachers, not just her, but teachers cannot pray with or in the presence of students. So this is a blanket. She wanted to do a Bible study with teachers before they started school. So before hours on her own time, they cannot do that. If by chance any student could ever see them, they cannot pray. And what's amazing about this is if people recall, and I think our listeners will, the Coach Kennedy case where he wanted to pray on the football field. And the Supreme Court ruled on that and said, absolutely, he has that right. In fact, Gorsuch wrote that schools cannot force employees to shed their religious identity at work. And yet that's what this principal is doing. So like you said, we did have a win. The school filed a motion to dismiss, and the district court denied that, saying absolutely not. This case goes forward, and he has appealed from that. And so now we are in the Fifth Circuit Appellate Court, and we have oral argument on Friday to go further with this case and defend this teacher's right to have her religious faith and practice her religious faith as a teacher.
Hello, phone lines are totally jammed. Before we get to the calls, I know Will kind of wanted to walk us through a bit of a timeline here of this situation that happened not only in Minnesota, but just in general, and sort of the conversation that has surrounded ICE and has surrounded immigration and some of the changes. And look, we have been honest with you. We've that's what I've always told you. We are not going to tell you what you want to hear. We're going to tell you what we believe legally and what we believe spiritually. And with that, I know can cause some conflict. That's okay. Let's have those discussions. I've always been open to having these discussions. Will, I know, wanted to walk us through a bit of a timeline here. And before we take calls, let's go ahead and do that.
Well, and I think also this is because of how partisan it gets to with the finger pointing as well, because this is so predictable, unfortunately and tragically in our country, that something like this was going to happen. Yeah. Because the Democrats almost wanted it to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. They were saying eventually ICE is going to kill an American citizen.
The amount of people I saw last night posting, I told you this was going to happen. I've been waiting for this day, and not in a positive, obviously in a negative saying, I told you, eventually we'd get here.
Well, but here's what's frustrating, I think, when you look at this. It's that, I mean, the president and the administration, it was never a secret that immigration was a big deal. And we know how bad it was under the Biden administration, how open borders were. And the American people were genuinely frustrated with that. And instead of Democrats trying to find a way to get common ground or to shut the border down, they gaslighted the American people and said it wasn't true. And what happens? Then someone who's going to do something different gets elected. The Trump administration. We knew all along there was going to be deportations and the border shut down. Then politicians immediately start calling ICE going in and conducting federal law enforcement of the immigration laws of this country, Nazi tactics. They call it fascist. Tim Walz himself said that ICE was the Gestapo. So they are using all the rhetoric that no one learned anything from during the election cycle, where there were 2 assassination attempts on the president, the current president now of the United States. After calling him Nazi, and then there are 2 assassination attempts, they still keep doing it. And they call ICE his Gestapo. Those are very heated, powerful words that have consequences. So what happens? You see what happened in LA. the need for the National Guard after American citizens trying to stop the federal law enforcement activity, going after people that are here illegally, not going after those people that are here legally. And what are they doing? They're shutting down streets, setting cars on fire that are not even connected to the government, trying to stop the operation of the federal government. And that was happening all over the country. And then there's a big fraud scandal in Minnesota. There's a tension there. ICE goes there as a response of that, as a part of it going around the country where there are more sanctuary, more friendly cities towards illegal, undocumented immigrants. And the illegal activity and the disruptive activity of American citizens in the streets, which was able to be continued in many of these blue cities, raised the temperature even more. You have to think that the members of federal law enforcement are nervous and on high alert because of that throughout the country. And eventually, something like this was going to happen. I don't think that any of us should be able to look at a couple video clips that are a few seconds long online and decide one way or the other what happened there. I mean, I think that a real investigation should be done, that the body cam footage should be reviewed, that people that are actual experts in this should look into it. And yes, there's a lot of leeway when you are law enforcement and a large vehicle is coming at you.
Sure.
But at the same time, we got there because of the rhetoric, because those members of ICE should not have been afraid of the American public that they may be run over and killed. And when you're calling them the Gestapo, like the governor of Minnesota has, that fear is going to be in many people that are just doing their job. And you can't start looking at all of the members of ICE and calling them illegal killers, calling American citizens, an entire government branch, illegal killers, and expect this to not continue. The rhetoric is going to keep making it worse. In the wake of this, when the mayor of Minneapolis gets up there and uses expletives to say, "Get out of my city," that's not going to make it any better. That's not working together. When Tim Walz is inferring he's at war with the federal government by calling up the National Guard, saying that we'll be ready, and then saying, no other governors had to go to war with the federal government before. One, completely ignoring an actual war in this country where governors and the federal government did go to war. That happened. That's not good. People don't want to go back to that. But two, making that inference doesn't make it better. Either more law enforcement are going to die or more American citizens are going to die. They've got to figure this out without immediately going to all of them are illegal killers, because then the people that want to disrupt that, they don't see them as humans. They dehumanize them. This whole thing has got to come down a few notches.
I want to hear from you. Let's go to the phones. I'm going to kind of try to ping pong back and forth different points of view. Let's go to Matthew first on line 6. Matthew, you're on the air.
Well, thank you. Hey, you guys have got this up right. You need to have respect for human life. There should be an investigation. You should watch the body cam footage, and there needs to be respect for law enforcement. Law enforcement can be wrong. They should be questioned, but they should not be yelled at, called names, and run over by cars.
Yeah, I think, Matthew, that's a very rational point of view of going, you know what? Things happen. There's not necessarily always this clear-cut answer. But you know what? I want to hear from someone who feels completely on the other side, and that's totally fine. Let's go to Charles in Denver. Charles, you're on the air as well.
Yes, I believe that she was resisting arrest. Then there is not one single camera vantage point that shows how far the officer was in front of the car. But they're saying that he should have seen where her tires were pointed. If he's too close to the bumper, he couldn't see the tires. And what is the turning radius of that car?
Yeah, Charles, I mean, that's partially why we say there needs to be a full investigation
here. Exactly. Charles, I think, and once again, the member of ICE that pulled the trigger on this, there's a good chance did fear for his life.
Yeah, maybe justifiable.
And with all of that context of everything that's gone on and being called illegal killers and being called the Gestapo and a car coming at you, yeah, I'm not saying that it wasn't. And by the way, I'm not saying that there is not a justifiable defense that will come out of that from a investigation. I'm also not even saying that he should be investigated as a potential criminal act here or a non-justifiable, just that we need to know what happened. But to that point as well, though, you also bring up resisting arrest. ICE arresting an American citizen for being there, they don't enforce regular American laws. They're not a police force in that sense. Therefore, even that brings up more questions.
What is law enforcement?
Of what is law enforcement in that situation? Do they have the right to detain her in enforcing immigration laws? That's a big question that a lot of armchair expert attorneys on Twitter have the answer for, but may not necessarily be the truth when all the facts are laid on the table.
Phone lines are jammed right now, but they will open up, and we have a second half hour of this broadcast. So if you don't get us on your local radio station, we are broadcasting as well on YouTube, Rumble, ACLJ.org. You can go there, find us live, Salem News Channel, and be a part of that conversation. It's a great way actually to gauge what people are thinking too. If you're on their YouTube channel, you can see all the comments that come in, or on Rumble, and have this discussion back and forth. There's a lot of people that agree, a lot of people that disagree, and that's okay. That's part of our show. Go to ACLJ.org right now. Second half hour coming right up.
Welcome to the all-new ACLJ app. Expert analysis and insight big tech can't censor. Customize your news and get real-time alerts on the issues you care about. Advocacy is now at your fingertips. Take action, make a difference. Support the causes you care about with just one tap. Be the first to know. Breaking news alerts sent straight to your inbox. Everything you need, all in one place. Stay informed, stay empowered. Download today.
We are so excited to announce the ACLJ's brand new app, completely redesigned.